One of our mottos at Assad Wealth Management is we want to bridge the gap between deen plus dunya. That is our slogan. We want to make sure that you're successful in this world and hereafter. It is very, very important that you grow wealth, you be wealthy, your family's taken care of. There's a comprehensive financial plan in place, but we do not want you to compromise your principles. That is the motivation for what we do every day.
Sharia compliant investing is important for Muslim community because of the lack of options available on the market for Muslims to begin with. When they earn their money, there's inflation, times are changing, your money which is today is not worth much after a couple of years, and so on and so forth. So there's a natural depreciation of your money.
I loved his process because he meets up with you, he understands your questions, he understands your financial position for your family, for your future financial goals, what you're trying to achieve. And then he comes up with a plan. And then we discussed those plans in a couple of meetings, and then we were able to set up and do the investments.
Whenever I have a need, I give him a call or send an email. There's a quick response back from him. He's always on top of my finances, and we go through our financial management plan twice in a year basis as well. And he gives me honest advice. Something is good and something which has risk. And it's not about just pushing or selling a product. It's all about what is comfortable for me.
His relationship with the scholars is continuous, and he continues to do the seminars and webinars to educate people around concepts like zakat, like how they can do the halal home financing and mortgages. So this is very important that he is himself invested in the learning, and he is distributing that learning, and it's built into his process.
My message to the community is that do not be scared of investing. Investing is actually quite simple. Educate yourself on the basics, inshallah ta'ala. Allow yourself to learn and allow yourself to have your money work for you. Once we have money, once we have wealth, it gives us the flexibility and freedom that we seek, and allows the capacity to give more, allows the capacity to take care of our families and, the cause that we believe in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, everyone. Jazakallah khairan for joining us for another exciting and a very informative, slightly different program for you usually. We come to you live. I do a webinar on many different topics in the past, including, how to buy a home the halal way, how to create Islamic will, is Bitcoin halal or haram, and many different topics. But today we were launching something very new, something very exciting, something very different, and we're calling it Balance. As always, we want to make sure that you're familiar with some of the compliance. Anything that you see in this video is not intended to provide you with personalized legal or investment advice. And then if you have any questions, please reach out to us directly. But back to Balance, this is a brand new program. It's a very new idea, concept. We want to come to you and present some of the best speakers that we can find when it comes to Islamic finance. We're going to be concentrating our conversations around retirement planning, halal investments, business success stories, and interviewing some of the financial experts that are available to us, inshallah ta'ala. So we were excited to launch this program. And we have, myself being in this industry for close to about 20 years now. I'm working with IG Wealth Management. I have certain designations. One of them is a CFP, a Certified Financial Planner. We actually are located in Calgary, Alberta, but we also have the capacity to work with individuals in different provinces within Canada, which includes Alberta, BC, Nova Scotia, Ontario, and Saskatchewan. My partner in crime, which most of you know, is Sheikh Navaid Aziz. Alhamdulillah, he is a Canadian Muslim public figure. He was raised in Montreal, and I had the opportunity to meet him a few years later in Alberta, in Calgary. Shaykh is a teacher at the Maghrib Institute. He is a director of community development at the Yaqeen Institute, alhamdulillah, and he has had numerous appearances both in print and media. He is our Sharia advisor. He is a mentor. He's a friend. I'm going to bring Sheikh Navaid in right away. He's going to take the opportunity to introduce something very exciting, a very exciting guest that is joining us today, inshallah ta'ala, all the way from Chicago. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, ya Sheikh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Hash. I'm really excited today. I'm so happy that we're able to launch, our podcast that we've been discussing for so many years. Rather than doing those scripted webinars, we're going to be
Yeah,
doing a fun yet educational podcast with
inshallah.
an amazing individual that I have benefited from immensely throughout the years, mashallah, tabarakallah. And he is none other than Sheikh Joe Bradford, who is currently visiting Chicago, as was mentioned. So Sheikh and I, we originally met at the Islamic University of Medina. In fact, the very first memory that I have of him, believe it or not, Hash, was we had Faluda together on Shara Satin in the year 2000. That is my first
Subhanallah.
memory of him. And then
Amazing.
obviously we saw each other throughout our years at the Islamic University of Medina, where he completed a bachelor's in Sharia, and he went on to complete not one master's, but two masters, one in Islamic judiciary and another in Islamic capital markets. He's also a certified Sharia advisor and auditor from IOFI, and he's currently pursuing a PhD at the International Islamic University of Malaysia with a focus on financial injustice. He's been a part of a lot of amazing projects in relation to estate and insurance planning, investment and startup advisory, real estate development, and a personal advisor and zakat advisor as well. So it is with great honor and pleasure that I welcome to our platform none other than Sheikh Joe Bradford. Jazakumullah khairan for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum
Oops.
assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sorry, guys. 1 second.
Absolutely.
Perfect. There we go. I got it.
The pleasure is mine, mashallah.
Barakallah fikum, Sheikh.
You brought up that first memory, us eating faluda. That was the first time I had ever eaten faluda.
No way. Allahu
Yeah.
Akbar. And I got to be a part of that.
Do you remember what I commented on you the next time that I saw you?
I do not, Sheikh. Please
I
remind
said,
me.
I think I now have diabetes.
La ilaha illallah.
It was so sweet. I had never tasted anything like. I mean, it was good, but it was like so sweet
Yes.
that I literally thought like something was wrong with me after that. But,
Subhanallah.
yeah,
Subhanallah.
what an amazing memory! All of those buildings where we used to, get those things are all gone now.
They're all gone, completely gone. So much has
Whole
changed in
neighborhoods.
Medina.
Oh, yeah.
Allahu Akbar. Yeah, I used to be in Hayy al-Khandaq, and when I went back in 2012, it was completely gone. Like the whole existence of where I used to live, like you couldn't even tell that anything existed there. Subhanallah. So a lot has definitely changed. Yeah. So Sheikh, we have an amazing program with you today, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We're going to jump straight into it, inshallah ta'ala. So Hash, I know we have a couple of questions prepared for the Sheikh, so let's jump into it. Bismillah.
Absolutely. I still need to find out who thought of the idea of putting noodles to ice cream together, but that's yeah, Sheikh, Jazakallah khairan for joining us. I appreciate you. I follow you very, very diligently on all the different social media channels, including, Instagram and LinkedIn, and you're definitely a pioneer when it comes to Islamic finance. So I have a first question for you. As somebody who was converted to Islam, and then you pursued extensive Islamic scholarship, alhamdulillah, mashallah, all the different degrees in continuous education, how has your understanding of wealth evolved through this spiritual journey when it comes to the faith and finance aspect of it together?
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's actually the very first time I've been asked that question to on my perspective, because. So I think, like everyone, I grew up in a household where there was not a lot of financial literacy, and I didn't really get a lot of financial literacy or even kind of exploring of career opportunities until I became a Muslim. Right. So it was never, my kind of lower middle class American existence is kind of like, well, whatever you want to be when you grow up, you be it, whatever makes you happy.
Right.
Came into the Muslim community, and you've got some kids going, oh, my dad's forcing me to be a doctor or engineer or whatever. And other parents were maybe not that forceful, but very emphatic that, hey, you've got to get an education, you've got to be an earning member of society, you've got to know how to take care of yourself. So I I came into kind of a brand new experience on life of like, hey, there are possibilities. Those possibilities are going to need money. Now, on the topic of kind of perspectives on wealth, there's a deep anxiety in our community about falling into the haram. Very deep anxiety. And that actually sparked my personal journey. So I had attended back in the 90s, what we used to call, before the age of, webinars like this, it was, they used to call it, ilm online. And every masjid would pay $100 and you get an AT&T conference call number, and 15 masjids would call in because it cost $1,500 for the call, and you fax a set of questions to a sheikh overseas, and he would answer and Urdu and Arabic, and then it would be translated in each individual masjid. And I just remember the frustration that so many people had with the answers.
Right.
That seemingly everything was haram. That's really the catalyst that pushed me to specialize in this area, is seeing the frustration on, the guy in our masjid. He was a cable installer. He's like, I install cable for a living. Like, I don't have time to figure this stuff out, but I need a solution. And so my journey through learning about wealth has shown me that while the halal and the haram are important, they are penultimate in their importance. Equally important as well, and what we miss a lot of times, is the philosophy and the ethics behind our wealth.
Okay.
And how that affects our behavior.
Right.
As we will, by force of nature, have to at times accept things that aren't best. They're not best in class. They are second best. And because they are second best does not mean that they are wrong or that they should be simply shunned, and we should shut ourselves out of prosperity or the ability to grow. But we should be trying to grow as best as we can, and then mobilizing our wealth to better investments later on. So, my personal journey has gone from one of literally, no consciousness whatsoever, to then, feeling this, there's this huge anxiety, and then saying, okay, what does our faith say about this? Not only in an assumed rigidity of black and white, but in reality, there is a scale of gray.
Right.
And that there is also a decision-making rubric for each of those shades of gray. And I say that, I guess I can sum it up to the viewers to say that what you're probably assuming is haram is probably not.
Right.
And what you're probably assuming there has no solution for, you just need to educate yourself and learn more, ask more, and you'll find something out there for you, right? I think the concept of wealth building sometimes can get stuck even in just investing in the markets. I have a couple of clients who do not invest in the markets whatsoever, and they're still very successful in their investments because they took the time to say to themselves, what am I comfortable with as a human being? What is permissible for me as a Muslim? And what can I navigate with the time that I have?
Right.
Amazing.
One thing actually that Sheikh Navaid says that I love about Sheikh Navaid, what he says everything is permissible unless otherwise proven otherwise, right, Sheikh? What do you say? This line that you say that I love. Sheikh Navaid,
I mean, those are from the principles of fiqh with regards to business transactions in particular, that we don't need to prove that a business transaction is halal. We need to prove that it is haram, because the default ruling is that it is halal. And this goes back to Sheikh Joe's point that, oftentimes people think that the default ruling is that it is haram. It isn't, right?
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite. Yeah.
Jazakallah khairan.
Alhamdulillah. So Sheikh Joe, to pick up where we left off, you run this program called MoneyOS. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that program, and adding on to that, how do we find a balance between this pursuit of wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has instilled a love inside of us for, while retaining some sort of Islamic humility at the same time? So if you could comment on both of those, I'd love to hear that, inshallah.
Yeah, absolutely. So MoneyOS is something I've been developing for some time. I used to do it privately with clients one-on-one, and now I'm moving it into an online format with kind of a blended approach of videos and interaction and things like that. And the idea is that, you need an operating system for your money. And that the operating system that you're going to get when you go to maybe a registered investment advisor here in the US is many times not going to even be somebody acting as a fiduciary, meaning acting in your best interest. They're going to be a commission-based salesperson trying to loop you in. So the idea behind MoneyOS is to delineate what are the functions of the investment world, and then what are the values of the Muslim, and then where do they converge or diverge, and what can you do, in lieu of that. So it's really just about trying to prep people to make better choices, not make the choice for them. I'm a very big proponent of empowering people. I think is if we empower people to be righteous and empower them with the right information, then righteousness and the right information can bring about a lot of prosperity. And I think that kind of answers your question through the hadith of I believe it's Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu anhu, who came to the Prophet ﷺ, and if I recall, it's either in Sahih Muslim or in the Muslim of Imam Ahmed, where he came to the Prophet ﷺ after accepting Islam, and he said, "O Messenger of Allah, I've come to accept Islam and to be with you." And so he said, "I want to send you out on a scouting mission. Perhaps you'll be able to earn some money while you're out, or you'll see battle and there'll be some spoils or something. And Allah will give you goodly wealth. وَيَرْزُقُكَ اللَّهُ رِزْقًا صَالِحًا or رِزْقًا طَيِّبًا. God will give you goodly wealth." And he instinctively says to the Prophet ﷺ, "Ya Rasulullah, lam uslim min ajli al-mal, wa innama aslamtu lillahi wa li rasulihi." Oh, Messenger of Allah, I didn't accept Islam for money. I accepted Islam for Allah and His Messenger. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Yes, but نِعْمَ الْمَالَ الصَّالِحِ لِلرَّجُلِ الصَّالِحِ. But how good is this goodly wealth for a righteous man?" So the internal conflict that we have many times about our wealth, I think is sometimes a visceral reaction to the relative unfamiliarity that we have with the financial world. And that we've been many times told so frequently that finance is haram, right? That we will instinctively reject things that are permissible for us. Like in Canada, you guys have this is the RSSP or the
RSP, yeah.
It's RRSP?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, because I've probably been saying it wrong for years. So RRSP, right? Here in the US, we have the IRA,
Sure.
right? Or the 401k or whatever number of different government incentivized investment vehicles, or not, shouldn't say vehicles, but investment accounts there are. And I often tell people, excuse the viewers, excuse me, I have, yes, nice coffee. People ask me, they say, I thought the IRA is haram. And I say, no, the IRA is this, it's a cup. You can literally put anything in this cup. I could put wine in this cup. I could put iced coffee in this cup. The cup is not halal or haram. It's just a cup. What you put in it is what is important. And learning about what you can actually put in that cup and when you can pour it out, and when you should drink it, when you should not drink it. It's just like learning the rules of when you can break your fast and when you can't, what you can eat, what you cannot. And so I think a lot of the anxiety comes from unfamiliarity. And that stems into a certain dogmatism, right? A certain type of rigidity that can sometimes set us back. And so my advice to people about this is be open to learning everything. And when they say everything, yes, I tell people learn how to calculate an interest rate. You're not going to be dealing in interest,
Right.
But if you don't know how to calculate an interest rate, you're basically kind of ceding that power to whomever is behind the computer, telling you this is what it's going to cost, or this is an absolute must, or whatever it may be, right? So the idea behind our unfamiliarity or becoming more familiar doesn't mean that we have to make a choice, but it does mean when we do make a choice, we make an informed one.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Barakallah fiqh.
Yeah.
One of my favorite statements that is attributed to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah is when he was asked, what is zuhd? And he said, zuhud is that if a man was to gain 100,000 dinar or to lose 100,000 dinar, it wouldn't change his emotional state. So the problem has never been wealth. The problem has always been, fighting that internal greed and stinginess that we have inside of us. And I think through education, it's we can definitely go a long way, inshallah.
Yeah, and I would be interested to learn more about you all's practice, because my experience in the financial planning world and in the financial advice world has been that with algorithmic trading, with the state of technology, even before the advent of AI, everything was kind of veering towards most of the heavy lifting being done for you, right? And that the real, for any person, whether they're specialized in servicing Muslims or just servicing the general population, the real challenge is in inculcating behavioral change in the client.
But yes.
And that, I think, is the true advisor of a true value of a personalized advisor, right? It's the person that you can call on the phone and just say, hey, tell me how I'm going to deal with this, right? Because the first thing we run to is the numbers. Oh, the market dropped. Should I sell everything? I'm sure you got a bunch of calls like that the last couple of months.
Not that many. Alhamdulillah.
But yeah, you need that person, and you need to instill in them as well the idea, like look, any decision we make as Muslims should not be rash, right? It should not be more detrimental than the situation that we're in, and those types of behavioral modifications, I think, are the real crux of kind of what good advice will be in the near and in the far future.
Yeah, absolutely, Sheikh. I actually, this is my goal one day when I get a chance, and I want to write a book, and the book is going to be titled that investing is, subhanAllah, 10% science, math, graph, charts, AI, and reports, and whatever you want to call it, all the stuff that people get into, and 90% of investing is psychology.
Yeah,
so that's it, simple as that. I'm a full-time psychologist. That's what I do for a living. As I try to control emotions, right? And alhamdulillah, my clients are at the point where they're trained enough to know what's going on. But it's easy. It's very easy to get caught up in the emotion of investing. Anybody can do what I do. It's not that we have a magical. There was actually a time back in the day when I first started 20 years ago that we as advisors had an edge. We had access to information and data that the average person didn't have. So therefore, we had this thing where we can come to you and give you advice on investments and stuff like that. But now that's all public, so that no longer exists. But it's the psychology aspect of it. Sheikh, question for you. I just want to do a follow up on the MoneyOS, and then we'll move on to the next question. Is there an example of one or two that you can give us in the MoneyOS, what it is and how that works and how that does help people?
Yeah, so I divided it up into three groups that I think, again, if you looked at a Venn diagram of three circles, right? So there's the rules of halal and haram. There's the general philosophy of money and philosophy of wealth. And then there are the ethics and legalities of wealth that may be very, very context specific, right? So if I were dealing with an American client, we would be talking about, what is considered ethically in the American business American workplace, where American business world, and what is considered legal or not legal, right? And how does that interact with what the halal and haram is? And then when we are seeing those two, Venn circles converge, how does our philosophy of money come into play? To say, okay, now here's where benefit and harm come in. Here's where the overutilized, necessity arguments come in. How do we stay true to an informed perspective on our money, but not being a dogmatic one? So everything is kind of formed around those circles, going deep into them and looking at how they interact with each other, and that has everything to do with, here's this year's limits for investing in your defined benefits programs, toward to these are the stipulations for what you can invest in as a Muslim, to here's how you're going to be goal setting because our philosophy of wealth is X, right? I mean, I think a lot of people think of, just to touch on the philosophy of wealth part, a lot of people think that earning is somehow disliked. And what I've found in my practice is that men fall in this more than others, more than women.
Okay.
Men are more willing to give more charity as a way of kind of cementing a place in the akhirah, because they look and they say, well, my family's expenses are taken care of.
Right.
So I've done my wajib, and now I need to do whatever is going to get me in the best situation in the akhirah. And there's two problems with that. Number one is that the Prophet ﷺ himself have said, a dinar that you spend in the path of Allah, and the dinar that you spend freeing a slave, and a dinar that you spend helping others, and a dinar that you spend on your family, the best of these is the dinar that you spend on your family.
SubhanAllah. Okay.
And then if you look at the hadith of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, where the Prophet ﷺ, visited him in what he thought was his deathbed, and he told him, hey, I have a lot of money. I only have one daughter. Shouldn't I give all of my money away? Why is he saying that? Because generally daughter's going to marry. She's going to be cared for by someone else.
Right.
The short and sweet part of it is he said, no, give a third, but a third is still much. For you to leave your family wealthy is better than to leave them begging of others. He said, well, then how much should I give? He said, if you are to give anything, then, then 5 basically comes up to 5%. So the point being here is that the Prophet ﷺ is actually encouraging Sa'd to leave money for his family, right? Which means that he has to be making money during his life, which means that his family has to be completely cared for his life. So it sets a whole string of obligations out for us that are leading up to there being enough money to be left behind. But if we're only thinking in somewhat selfish terms, right, we're actually stopping ourselves from a greater reward in the akhirah. Because the greater reward in the akhirah would be to make sure that our families are taken care of primarily in this life as well as, or in our lives as well as after our passing. And that would give us a better reward in this life as well as the next.
Any follow-up questions before I move on to the next one?
No, Bismillah. Let's continue.
Yeah, Sheikh Joe, question for you. So many Muslims, they understand the prohibition of riba. That's a common thing for all of us. But have you noticed? But also, what other aspects of wealth building do you find that many of us often overlook, either from the worldly perspective, Islamic perspective? We always kind of get stuck in this riba aspect of it. Like, we just got on a call with you, mentioned the fact the number of people I run into who have wealth literally sitting in checking accounts, not doing anything, losing money to inflation, having to pay a cap on it. Are there other aspects that you've noticed in your career over time that we should be aware of?
Yeah, so I think the riba prohibition is an important one, but I think many times there is a misconception of what even is riba. I have found people, even sometimes they maybe are like invested through a master partnership agreement, right? And then they get a profit from there, like, oh my God, no riba. Like, what? Why is it riba? I put in 10,000 and they gave me 15,000 back. Yeah, because you were an investor in a business. So reorienting people to stop thinking about every account like it's a bank account, right? Oh, I put in money, I'm taking out money. No, I put in money, I bought a business, right? And sometimes you have to break it down to very simple things. Like if you bought a car and worked Uber, would the money you earned through Uber be, I'm never going to do that. I know you're never going to do that, but bear with me. Would the money you earn from working Uber be riba? No, it wouldn't. It would be money earned for, the hard work that was done. So what if you bought Uber? So I think reorienting how people understand what exactly riba is an important one. And the most common thing that I've found with people in investing, I'll say two things. Number one is the necessity of clear, transparent documentation. A lot of people go into private deals, which are very bad for them.
Yeah.
Because they maybe have a lot of money, they have a little bit of time, and they're over trusting. to certain parties. And then when they get burned, they blame, well, it was Islamic finance, or it was, and really that's like, that's like saying, well, I went to the doctor and, he said, he said XYZ, and now all of medicine is bad.
Sure.
Because you didn't follow the doctor's advice.
Right.
So medicine must be fraudulent. Another one, in addition to the issue of like transparency and documentation, has to be. I'm just drawing a blank. I just drew a blank right now. So we talked about riba. We talked about transparency in trade, and then I would say a third one would be let's come back to it because I don't want to belabor the point. I just drew a blank right there after giving the Uber example. So
no worries.
Okay, inshallah. I think Sheikh Navaid has a question for you.
Of course, I have loads of questions lined up.
I have so many follow-up questions too.
Okay,
we need to have a 3-hour podcast.
So, Sheikh, we both recently had elections. United States had their elections. Canada had their elections. And one of the strategies I try to impart on the community is don't put all of your eggs in one basket. Don't just focus on the politics. Try to, even focus on the financial side, right? A lot of times you can achieve financially what you can't achieve politically. So one of the conversations that keeps coming up is how do we as Muslims, in the frameworks that we have and the systems that we have, build generational wealth? Yeah. So any advice you have on that, I'd love to hear, inshallah.
Yeah, so I think after, it's been 600 days of destruction in Gaza.
Right.
It's been 600 days of the destruction of the international order, human rights order. And it's been 600 days of paltry excuses and lack of action on behalf of politicians. And most people who were overly invested in politics really found themselves neutered. They really could do nothing. People who, unsurprisingly so, were more adept in the business world and had a little bit of money to throw behind were able to get their voices heard or at least take action. And I think it's very important for Muslims to start to realize that they are a very wealthy contingent in the areas that they live in. Although, yes, we do relatively have, I think the latest stats from the Muslim Philanthropy Project out of University of Indiana. If you're familiar with that project, if not, I'd highly recommend to check it out. But they put out, peer-reviewed, verified data about Muslim giving and poverty levels and all that kind of stuff. So basically, yes, we have a large swath of people that are very wealthy. We have a very large middle class for our community. We have a very large group of poor people as well, people that live at or below the poverty line. So a little bit different than some other faith communities that are skewed in one direction or the other. So we're much more evenly spread. But we have a power in our community, which I think is one that's connected to our value of wanting to give and wanting to create value for the akhirah. And so one of the ways that I think generational wealth is going to be built is by Muslims educating themselves about how they're going to be able to build wealth for themselves and their families, and taking seriously the idea of leaving their family set up for a generation or two. I always heard, studying financial planning, those who say, the most successful people, make money not to leave to their kids, but to their grandkids.
Right.
So taking that into consideration. And then I think as well through leveraging things like donor advised funds. And I think, Hash, you guys have a donor advised fund, correct?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, just launched it.
So, taking advantage of things like donor advised funds, creating Waqf, creating these things that are outside of the for-profit political, for-profit realm, the political realm, the purely charitable realm, but they have a charitable and a social function. I think will help to allow our community to grow and to find consistent funding for their needs, right? Essentially just diversifying the types of opportunities that we create in the community for ourselves at an individual level, and then our communities is extremely important. Economic power is extremely important, and it is just that, right? The least that could be said is that it will allow future generations of Muslims to not have to experience the same growing pains that we experienced, you know,
Right.
of constant fundraisers and all this and all that, you know. And the greater benefit from it would be that there would be, you know, greater mobility in society for our faith values that we feel are not beneficial just to us, but are beneficial to all of mankind.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's something we've been talking about a lot, hey, Sheikh Navaid.
Always, always.
SubhanAllah. Sheikh, you have another follow-up question?
No, I think I'm good for that for now. Actually, no, sorry, that is not correct. Now, Sheikh, we just spoke about building generational wealth. That's for the future. Let's try to go back a little bit. And I think this is where, inshallah, we can really benefit our audience. Can you think of an example or two, either from the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ or from the companions or from the tabi'in or throughout Islamic history of practicing Muslims and how they utilize their wealth and how they built their wealth? So just an example or two would be really appreciated, Sheikh.
Yeah, that's a great question. Of how they built their wealth and how they benefited others with their wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that comes to mind is if you know, I was just in Medina during Ramadan, and you know, our local school did an Umrah trip, so alhamdulillah I was blessed to go with them. And you know, we passed through, you know, Quba, and you pass through the area where there are still farms, and one of the farms that's still standing there is the farm of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, you know, who built considerable wealth, property as well as income, and then made it a waqf. But he made it a waqf for his family and for charitable purposes. So essentially a family waqf, you know, waqf dhurri or waqf usri as they call it. And subhanAllah, it's you know, a lot of times we'll mention, oh, Uthman radiallahu anhu, you know, he bought the well of Ruma and it's still giving water until today, right? But that's all, you know, charity to the poor. Whereas, you know, Abu Ayyub's great grandson is managing, you know, they have a lecture hall there on the same property, on the same farm where they do lectures in the seerah. And they have specialists come through and things like that. And the family is able to survive off of that. And anything above and beyond the family's needs is what goes to the poor, right? So now you have a Ansari family that lived at the time of the Prophet ﷺ there continuously in the same, walking on the same land that their forefathers walked on, living until today. And why was that? Because of a decision that I'm going to take this amount of wealth that I have accumulated, and I'm going to make sure that it benefits not only my akhirah, but it's going to benefit my family. And by benefiting my family, I'm also benefiting my akhirah.
Jazakallah khair. I think that's a wonderful example. So here he's combined between taking care of his family as well as his charitable contribution, alhamdulillah. Sheikh, so to pick up on that point, maybe you can educate us a little bit on US practice, but what would be like the modern day equivalent if someone in the US wanted to do that? How would they go about doing something like that?
I mean, there's a couple of ways they can do it. They could do essentially just a family trust, right? That's the most basic structure. I think that the U.S. regime, the U.S. tax regime and the U.S. legal framework is probably one of the more open in the world for contract in general and for creating family trusts. So it really is just having a lawyer that understands that what you want to do, and then having them draft the documents according to that, setting out a policy for the trust, and then funding it. That's really what it boils down to. The only time it becomes tricky is when you put assets into a trust that may be disputed later on because of death or divorce. Right? So like, for example, if I'm married and I put my family home into the trust and then I get a divorce, there are instances where the court will actually claw back the home out of the trust and divide it up amongst the heirs, or not the heirs, but the parties to
the beneficiaries of the trust. Yeah,
exactly. Parties to the original deed. Well, only part of it going back into the trust. those are intricacies that really only happen kind of, as edge issues. But in general, it's really just create a trust, know what you want from that trust, how it's going to function, what's your intention behind creating that, create a policy for it, and then fund it. And, even as small as it might be, you can still do that and then fund it over time as well. And, you can get the ball rolling with that.
Jazakallah khair. One of the things that I'm greatly motivated by is a story of Ishaq al-Rahawayh and Imam al-Bukhari rahimahumullah, where Ishaq al-Rahawayh, in passing, he just says, I wish someone would compile all the authentic hadith, and then it settled in the heart of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah that he should run with this. So I'm hoping by asking you this question and you explaining it to someone in our audience is like, you know what, I'm inspired. I'm going to go start these family awqaf, and we're going to spread halal wealth across the states and benefit the Muslim community bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Amazing. A shared question for you on a personal basis, personal level, I have to say. What personal financial practices that you follow in your own life to ensure that you do proper money management and grow your wealth for you and your family next generation, and also making sure that you're able to balance both, the Islamic values are important to you, and then the world that we live in, just finding the balance between the two on a personal level.
So on the personal level, all finance comes down to making money and spending money in the end of the day. And so what I try to do is every quarter I review what I'm making and review what I'm spending. And therefore, I call it leakage. You've got a subscription that you signed up to, you thought it was a limited time deal, and you've been paying on it for months. You leave that for a year, it can be a significant amount of money. So go back and review. Hey, have I been paid for all of the work that I've done? What have I earned that's not considered cash? Maybe reward points and things like that I can use instead of, in lieu of, like I'm traveling right now, and I, sped off to the airport without my jacket. And I got here to Chicago and needed to get this jacket, right? So I searched my account, like, do I have any gift cards that are in my account? I found a gift card for Target. I went to Target, I used it, I bought the jacket, So I just, utilized wealth that I probably wouldn't have even thought of. Another thing that I think is very important is to invest early and to invest often.
Mm-hmm.
And what I try to do is a cash sweep on my account every week.
Okay.
And this is something that I learned from a great brother out in California, Safir Muhyiddin, who say basically dollar cost average. But if you dollar cost average on a monthly basis, right, or on a biweekly basis, you miss a lot of the hills and the valleys that come up. But if you have the ability to, because of your cash flows, even the little bit that you maybe every Monday you look at cash that's not being utilized and you throw it into your investment account, you're going to be able to capture more over time. So that's another thing that I try to do, is to not let money go unutilized. And Hash, like you mentioned earlier, I mean, there are a number of people that I know that have not thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in checking accounts, right? Doing absolutely nothing. And when you tell them, this could be making you X amount of money every year, which would essentially pay for the expensive vacation that you take because you try to burn through that money because you don't know what to do with it, right? And you could have this, it opens up the possibilities for them, right? To understand how they can do more, give more, experience more. So one thing that I like to do is to try and capture those, to dollar cost average as frequently as possible, so that those differences are captured more often, and I'm able to make more over time.
Great advice.
A couple of pointers on that, Sheikh. SubhanAllah, we talk about doing comprehensive financial planning, and part of that is basically me asking our clients to let us know what they're making, so we get the pay stubs that tell us what they're making, and then we send them a spreadsheet of what they're spending their money.
Yes.
And It's not an exaggeration. On average, if I find, you know, 2 to 3 grand a month missing, that's usually we can find that on Heartbeat. I had one scenario where a client was missing $110,000 a year. Where I'm like, man, he's like, where's this $110,000? It's 10K a month missing. He had no clue. I didn't have any clue. I'm like, he's not a client, but to find $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month from your cash flow, it's not that normal whatsoever. If you actually go through there and sit and do that.
One thing that'll add to that, and people might think, well, I don't really have $2,000-$3,000 that I would go missing, so it doesn't matter, right? And this is a real story. I tell this all the time when I teach now. You know, I had a client who, when he was in college, he started an IRA. You know, he had a student job, and he started an IRA, Roth IRA, and all he would put in was something like $50 every paycheck. He did that until he finished college, and then he started to, you know, max out. And the only thing that was halal at that time that he could really invest in with confidence were the amount of mutual funds, amount of mutual growth and amount of mutual income. And he would just, you know, went from 4.5 to 5 to 6, you know, now 7.5 grand every year. But I think by the time he stopped contributing because he was boxed out because of income limits, it was maybe only at 5,500, something like that. So for a period of 10 years, he was putting what's considered a paltry amount given to, you know, what he earns, you know, he earned after the age of 30. So from 20 to 30, he put in, you know, maybe $80,000 at most. Yeah. And when he opened that account, unbeknownst to him, he opened that account like, oh, I've got this IRA that I forgot about. It was like $2.4 million.
Allahu Akbar kabira.
Yeah. I mean, he's like, well, you know, what am I going to do with this? It's like, well, your kids are getting married, so you obviously have expenses there. You have elderly parents, so you have expenses there. But, you know, it's important, you know, as the Prophet ﷺ said, you know, لا تحقرن من المعروف شيئا. Do not hold any amount of goodness in disdain. You know, the best of Allah, the best of actions are the ones done most consistently, even if small. So tying that into our money, any amount of money that you can put towards savings and growth, that, you know what, if you're not spending it, it's just going to sit there and get eaten by inflation, is going to be for your benefit.
Jazakumullah khairan.
My first thought was how much zakat he's got to pay back. That's my first thought. Not about what he's got money on. I was like, dude, you got to pay some zakat.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar.
Years there.
So, Sheikh, we're getting close to the end of our conversation today. It's been great, alhamdulillah. I have a question for you, twofold. Number one, with regards to the markets. Number two, with regards to cryptocurrency. How do you feel about cryptocurrency being the future? And, you know, particularly with this movement that you've seen on Twitter that is very anti-fiat currency. You know, is Bitcoin like the actual future of the Muslim Ummah? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and crypto in general. And then number two, where do you see the markets going? I mean, you know, we saw the tariffs whirlwind to go on. That seems to have calmed down. Markets are pumping higher than ever. Where do you see this going?
So as far as with crypto goes, I believe that cryptocurrency has its place and its function. I am not a anti-crypto person, you know, despite many of the fatwa that were issued over the last couple of years that were completely against cryptocurrency. I think some of the fatwa were well-intentioned in that they were heeding many of the concerns of scholars for, you know, to prevent manipulation and fraud. And really, that's kind of what it boils to. Everybody mentions the statement of Imam Ahmed that it's the authority of the Sultan to issue currencies. On the same page of Furu' that they quote from, he also mentions, however, if a zakat collector goes to collect zakat and they're using a currency other than the Sultan's currency, as long as they accept it amongst themselves and it has value, then he can collect it from them. Which shows that he was simply trying to prevent people from going into fraudulent transactions and not prohibit all transactions unless sanctioned by a particular government entity, as there was no such government entity for the first 70 years of Islam. Right? There's no mint. I'm also not like a Bitcoin maxi kind of guy. I find I find and I've said this to many of the brothers that promote this, the promotion of Bitcoin is the most Islamic money is a platitude that has yet to be substantiated Islamically from Islamic legal perspectives, right? Could it be said that it has, more built-in features for fairness? Sure, but I highlighted in an article that I wrote for Muftah magazine that the same problems with fiat currencies are applicable to Bitcoin. They can be used for interest-bearing transactions. They can be, they can be suspect or subject to the same types of problems. And then in a larger political economy perspective, an independent currency would essentially would leave a Muslim nation susceptible to currency manipulation by others. And it would not lead to a strong currency for that nation. So there's a lot more that needs to be done on that, but I think cryptocurrencies have their place. I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of brothers over the past 10, 15 years, especially like friends from Syria who were unable to get their own wealth out of the country, right? But they said, oh, well, I might have been given refuge somewhere, but I don't want to take handouts. I'll get my money out. I'll do business. They were able to do that because of cryptocurrency, right? And then there's been a lot of scams in the same vein that I think people have to be very, very careful of, because you're going to go and get I'm going to buy a meme coin because it's going up. Well, I mean, you could go to the slot machine and it goes up, right? I mean, it's the same example. Thing. Yeah. There has to be some substance, utility, and purpose behind it. And most crypto, I think, much of crypto doesn't fulfill that. As far as the markets go, I mean, your guess is as good as mine, right? I mean, I think it's modern fortune telling to try and say that exactly where the markets are going. But I have confidence that the markets are going up just because of istishab al-hal, just the continuity of what was and will be. We've seen that the averages for any 10-year period from 1932 until today have generally been to the upside, generally been 6% to 7% or more. And it'll continue as such. And the most important thing about this, I think, is that we're dealing with, yes, fiat currency systems where the money the money supply is manipulable, right? And what that means is that if you're not investing, you will by necessity lose purchasing power. So it becomes almost a must to be invested in something that beats inflation so that you can maintain your power. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith from Daraqutni, Al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la. Islam succeeds and it is not succeeded. So doing what a Muslim doing what they can to preserve their wealth, to preserve their options, and utilize that wealth in the best way possible is an absolute imperative.
Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you so much, Sheikh. Follow-up question for you. One of our clients asked us about your thoughts on options, and have your thoughts on options changed over time?
Well, maybe some of your viewers don't know what my thoughts on options are. So there are three main opinions about options, calls, and puts, which is the right, not the obligation, to buy or sell a security at a given price. So the majority of scholars have said that this is the sale of an asset that one does not own, and therefore it is not permissible due to the lack of marginal utility and the uncertainty in the transaction. The second group of scholars said it is permissible if you own the underlying asset because you can sell access to that asset that you own. So it's connected to an asset that you own. The third position, which is what I take, is that it's not the sale of an asset to begin with. It's the sale of a right. It's like selling someone a ticket to a soccer game, right? Or a football game for our international viewers, that you have the right to access that game up until a certain point. And then after that, there's no value to that. You can obtain that value beforehand. You can maybe resell your tickets if you want. So the idea of it being a right, not an asset, is very important. You're not selling something you don't own. You're selling a right that you have to the market. Number two, there is marginal utility in the options trade, and there's been a lot of research about that. And the uncertainty or the gharar argument, I don't believe is accurate, because the options markets have actually more data associated with the trades than the equities markets do. And so admittedly, while this is not the most popular opinion, I stick by it. And it's something that I did not express for, I think, the first 10 years of actually researching the issue. So I think it's very important for people. Sometimes they see my face, they might read my name, and they think like, oh, who's this upstart guy? I've been working in banking and finance since like 2007. I started off in the insurance industry and then moved into banking and then corporate banking. And so I've done retail. So I've tried to be very reserved with the opinions that I do express publicly, and not express them unless I'm very convinced of the evidences and I'm convinced of the position that I take.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. And I think this is a great educational point for all of our viewers of the flexibility in fiqh. The Prophet ﷺ, he reminds us that when the mujtahid is correct, they get 2 rewards, and if the mujtahid is incorrect, they get 1 reward. Like the mujtahid is still rewarded. And this shows us the importance of the diversity, but the flexibility, and most importantly, being merciful and compassionate towards each other. Like just because someone differs with you, it doesn't mean you tear them down. So Jazakumullah khairan for that, Sheikh. Greatly appreciate that.
Yeah. And I would say this, if anyone is thinking of using options and they're not familiar with trading equities, they should absolutely not do it.
Yeah.
In fact, the best thing, I'll tell you what I do. I buy ETFs and mutual funds because I just simply don't have enough time in my life to follow technical analysis and all of that. I leave it to the experts. So, and this is the point that I was going to mention earlier. People do not, a big problem in our community is that people do not make a difference between trading and investing. Oh, brother, I want to start investing. What should I do? Should I download Robinhood and start following individual stocks? Absolutely not. You should not download Robinhood unless you don't have enough games on your phone, right? And instead, you buy these 3 boring funds and do that only. But there's no adrenaline there, right? So and Sheikh Navaid, you know this yourself. There's a difference between a mudir and a muhtakir, so a person who's buying and selling consistently versus a person who's taking a buy and hold position, and the fiqh differs because of that, right? So I think that needs to be clarified for a lot of people. That hey, I'm going to put my money with Hash and Assad Wealth. They're doing the heavy lifting for me. I'm not going to have to worry about that. And when there is an issue, he's going to speak to me. That I think has to be clarified to people, because they want the excitement of, well, how am I going to make money if I'm not doing this, right? In reality, it's almost absolutely certain they'll lose money.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. Hash, why don't you bring it home with the rapid fire questions, and then we'll conclude with farewell advice from the Sheikh, inshallah.
Absolutely. That's no problem. Actually, a question for you. We came up with this rapid fire. You can go quick with these questions, but I want to ask you a book that you read that changed your life.
Mortimer Alder, How to Read a Great Book. Yeah, absolutely. If there's one book across all genres, like there's different books for like fiqh and different topics, but one book that's across all genres that has changed my life is that book, Mortimer Alder, How to Read a Great Book.
Interesting. Okay, we got that down on recording. A piece of advice that you've gotten that you'll never forget.
Piece of advice that I've gotten that I've never forget is my dear friend Abu Malik Danoon. When I was very early in my Islam, he said, learn to view the mistakes of others as a learning opportunity. You will have less mistakes and more success.
Allahu Akbar.
Amazing. I love it. That's how I live my life. That's the motto of my life. Anything you wish you could do differently if you could go back in time?
Anything that I wish I could do if I could go back in time?
Do differently in life.
No regrets. I don't live with any kind of. I look at every single thing that has happened to me in my life as making me who I am at this moment in time, and I'm very, alhamdulillah, grateful for that. I think
Alhamdulillah.
that if there's something that I can do differently, it would be connected to the now and the future of restitution of a wrong or improving. But I don't believe that we can time travel or change the past. So there's no need to even think about that. We just have to live. Many of the scholars would say al-Muslimu ibn al-waqt. A Muslim is a son of the moment. And if you live like that, then there's nothing to regret in the past. There's just improving now and building for the future.
And I think that goes in line with our creed as well. فَإِنَّ لَوْ تَفْتَحُ عَمَلُ الشَّيْطَانِ, right?
Yeah,
You start
absolutely.
thinking about all the things in the past that you could have done differently, you're going to be in grief and depression for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Hash, last one, bring it home.
What is one item on your bucket list that you still haven't achieved yet, or would like to achieve?
One item on my bucket list that I haven't achieved is to write a cookbook.
Write a quick
Cookbook. Bismillah.
Yeah.
Okay, now you got to tell us about this, Sheikh. What type of
legit.
cuisine? What are we talking about? Farm to table stuff? Like, what is it?
Oh, everything. I mean, I have a unique. I think out of in the world of cookbooks, I'll have a very unique proposition, right? I don't want to give it away because I don't want somebody who is maybe a bit more adept to take the idea. But I think that's it's unique. It'll add to the the genre of cookbooks. But I've always been a fan of cooking shows and cookbooks. Like one of my favorite cookbooks is The Frugal Gourmet Cooks American, where he goes through American history and he outlines the foods that were, by First Nations peoples, by the settlers of different areas and things like that, the regions and all of that. The Art of Cooking is also, Julia Child is, Joy of Cooking is another one. The Silver Spoon, it's a huge, there's a few that I bought recently. Andalusian and Iraqi cookbooks from like the 8th and 9th centuries that have been translated. Yeah,
mashallah.
Yeah. So my that's one of my bucket list items is to write a cookbook. Yeah,
the tawfiq, may Allah grant you tawfiq, Sheikh. So let's pick up on that point. Sheikh Joe Bradford opens up a restaurant. What is that one dish that the restaurant is known for?
Oh, that's hard. That's too hard. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'd have a signature dish.
No signature dish.
Maybe. I mean, given that I'm a Southern guy at heart, it's probably going to be chicken fried steak.
Okay, there we go. That's what I'm talking about, Sheikh. There's not too many halal options for that. Yeah.
Something from my my father, my grandmother's background. They're from Alabama originally. So chicken fried steak, red eye gravy, maybe black eyed peas or something. At least like a dinner once a night, Southern style dinner once a night.
The good stuff. I appreciate that, Sheikh. Thank you, Sheikh. Firstly, Jazakumullah khairan for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefit Islam and the Muslim community through you and grant you tawfiq and accept everything from the good and forgive any mistakes and shortcomings. Allahumma ameen. On that note, any farewell advice that you would like to impart to our viewers with regards to their deen and their dunya, or something that you feel is important for the Western Muslim to know, would be greatly appreciated. And we'll conclude on that note, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So I would say that with regards to everything in life, and especially with your money, it is not wrong to be selfish or self-interested in a beneficial way, as we talked about with the hadith of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. It's not wrong to build wealth for oneself and one's family. It is not wrong to have wealth. We talked about the hadith of Abdullah ibn Amr, because the best wealth, what great wealth for a righteous person. And it is also important to, as the Imam al-Ghazali points out about the hadith, لا تنظروا إلى من هو فوقكم. Don't look to those who are above you, but look to those who are below you. It is more likely that you will not hold Allah's blessings in disdain. That has to do with material wealth, but in meaning and value and what we're able to do with our wealth, we should absolutely be looking to those who have it better than us and saying, this person is more righteous, they have more time, they have more access. I want to be like that, right? The Prophet ﷺ said about a man who saw a person who was giving charity, day and night, was extremely philanthropic. He said about him, if I had if I had the wealth of so and so, I would do what he's doing. The Prophet ﷺ said, they both have the same reward. So even if you don't have the wealth, having the perspective of wanting to do good, I think is the most important thing, because we're lacking a lot of positivity in our community, and we're only going to be the best nation brought out for mankind when we can order the good, forbid the evil, believe in Allah. And I think what that means is that we have a positive outlook, that as an ummah and as individuals that make up that ummah, we're always pushing towards what's best.
Jazakumullah khair, and thank you so much.
Amazing.
Hash, any last announcements we want to make?
No, I really appreciate it. This is a phenomenal first episode of Balance. I'm so glad, so happy to have you here, Sheikh Joe.
Alhamdulillah, pleasure's mine.
I appreciate your time. I know you took some time away from your family, so a huge jazakallah khairan from me. Inshallah, we'll share the recording of everybody who came here. Usually in these situations, we get our Shaykh maybe to take us out with a beautiful dua, because I'm not capable of doing that. So inshallah, we can severe, and inshallah, Shaykh maybe can take us out with a dua.
Bismillah, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. To all of our wonderful audiences from all over the globe, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you and increase all of you in goodness, accept all of your good deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make your wealth a proof for you and not a proof against you. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all for our mistakes, sins, and shortcomings. Allahumma ameen. Till our next episode and webinar, please do check us out at asadwealth.ca. And inshallah, we'll be in touch. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.